Welcome to Chef Journeys. Have I got a dinger for you guys today? I brought in one of the chefs that I think is one of the more intentional, more focused human beings I've ever met in my whole life. He means a whole lot to me. We got to work together for a couple years, probably 20 years ago. And he has continued on the path that he started on when he was a teenager. And I really, really respect, again, his intent, his intention, and his focus. So let's check it out. Here we go with another episode of Chef Journeys. Just can't wait for you to meet this guy. Today with me is a good friend of mine, but also a wonderful chef, Chef Jason Balestrieri. So, Jason, welcome.
Welcome. Yes. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Absolutely. I think so everybody understands you and I worked together back in 2002, 3, and 4 in Los Angeles. Well,
That's
cool.
correct.
I've gotten old and crusty in that time, and from the looks of it, you have not, so that's good. I'm glad to see it. So we're on Chef Journeys. Why don't you tell me how you got into this business?
Wow. Now we're going back.
The
The short story that I tell people with the same question is I always had an affinity for food. I grew up in a decent sized family. I had many cousins, as in over a dozen cousins that lived within a 2 square mile area when I was growing up. So essentially every birthday, every holiday, every possible reason for a family gathering, got together, bunch of food, bunch of drink, and happy family members. And so that was always a positive experience. So at the same time, or shortly thereafter, or yeah, during the same time, I became one of those things called a latchkey kid, and had parents who were working. One was working third shift and one was working first shift. So sometimes as a young teenager, sometimes it became my responsibility to get the dinner going.
Oh.
So the physical act of preparing food somewhat from scratch became a necessity. Can't just survive on peanut butter sandwiches after school. You need something that's considered to be dinner. So that's when I guess I started using a knife. I guess you could say.
Nice.
I started using a knife and started cooking things in pots and pans. Didn't necessarily know why I was doing what I was doing, because I was just following directions from my mom and or a recipe card. But yeah, that's the humble beginnings of my affinity, my liking of food in general. As I became an older teenager, it's fair to say that I began to have a uh, curiosity. Let's call it a curiosity towards dining, restaurants, restaurants,
Yeah.
dining. Didn't have the money for it, of course, but you know, so that the thought of dining became something with positive motivation, so to speak. Um, Creating better food, and back then there were these things called magazines, and and there's only a couple left, but back then there was Gourmet magazine, which was always pretty big, pretty thick, and had lots of eye candy and a lot of recipes in it, as well as probably Food and Wine. Oh, and Bon Appetit. There you go. Bon Appetit and Gourmet. Those were the first two that I came across as a teenager. And so I started to have an interest in wanting to recreate what I was seeing in these particular magazines. Um, I I tell people in my first life, I was an athlete, soccer player, fortunate enough to get a Division I scholarship. But even when I can say that when people used to ask me, well, what are your goals? What are your aspirations if you don't continue your soccer career? And my immediate reaction was, I'm going to have a restaurant someday. I didn't necessarily know if I was going to be the chef of that restaurant, but I had enough interest in food and enough interest in restaurant world, I guess you could say.
Right.
And 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 the supposed glamour behind the restaurant world, right?
Man, it's glamorous.
Man, yeah, going out to eat and eating and drinking and socializing, and oh yeah, it's a good time by everybody. Except when you obviously peel back the layers, it's obviously things changed a little bit, gets a little serious. Uh, but so the first life ended when my uh, collegiate career ended. We're talking about the late '80s. The goals and aspirations of becoming a professional, of a decently paid professional soccer player in the United States in the late '80s was pretty much a foregone conclusion. So I did what some people might scratch their head, is I went from a 4-year university to trade school
Wow.
in my hometown. I didn't mention that, but yeah, I'm born and raised in Milwaukee,
Okay.
Wisconsin. So yeah, I wound up going to trade school, culinary arts associate degree,
Nice.
and obviously picked up a knife there and learned the basics. And slowly but surely, the soccer ball stopped rolling, and obviously the knife kind of took over from there.
Nice.
And at that point in time, there was no ifs, ands, or buts. I was going to be a chef. What kind of a chef, where I was going to land, obviously unknown, but
Right.
definitely going to be a chef at that point in time.
Tell us about your
Uh,
first restaurant job. That's what I want to hear. I love these.
First restaurant job. Okay, non-fast food, like real restaurant job when I knew that I was going to be a culinary
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was it was a small place called the Oakland Cafe in Shorewood, Wisconsin, which is a town right outside of Milwaukee, and uh, just breakfast and lunch. No, no, no. They
Nice.
also did dinner, but I didn't work dinner. I was on the AM shift. So yeah, I started out as a prep slash pantry
Okay.
person, cold side. So I came in the morning, did some prep, and then manned the cold station during lunch. And eventually that morphed into, hey, we need some help in the early AM doing breakfast.
Oh boy.
So then it was, when I mentioned, I said prep, the prep that I was doing, not only was I doing lettuce and things for my station, but also I was making scones and muffins and other baked
Oh
goods
wow.
for the cafe. So instead of coming in at 7, I started having to go in at 5:30. I think I started at 5:30, and I wasn't necessarily in charge of doing the muffins and scones anymore, but I was responsible for setting up the egg station, the omelet station. Yeah. So that was my introduction to um what's the term? It's a old school term of um what am I thinking about? Not fast order, but
Short order.
short order. Yeah, that was my
Oh
introduction. So, like I said, that's a
man.
kind of an old school term, but yeah, that was my introduction to a short order cook, which As we all know, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
So being on an egg station, I don't know if how time goes fast when you're on an egg station.
Yeah.
And this was not on a flat griddle eggs. This was omelet pan eggs.
Oof.
So,
I, I don't know which
but
is worse.
well, that big old griddle, you can bang out an omelet in what, 20 seconds?
Yep.
Just let it slide across the griddle and
And then
and
flip,
put your
flip, flip.
put your toppings on it and flip flip flip, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the first joint, and that was my introduction to restaurant life, restaurant hours, starting at 5:30 uh in in the upper Midwest, obviously colder snowy climate in the winter.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was riding a bike to work, and then obviously when the snow came, the bike didn't work so well, so then I had to figure out how to get there, whether it was brother's wheels or girlfriend's wheels or whoever's wheels I could borrow, because obviously starting at 5:30, one 5:30 to 1:30, that was it, right? It's
Yeah.
it's you're done early, right? So yeah, that was the first gig.
Nice. I think it's interesting, like listening to you talk about it, like you kind of had that vision of like I'm gonna own a restaurant, I'm gonna be a part of a restaurant, I'm gonna own a restaurant at some point. I mean, I think that like getting into the industry is one thing, but like there's always something that like really holds us in it. So I mean, where did your drive and where did your kind of career go from there that kept you going towards owning a restaurant?
Hmm. Well, eventually, I mean, I'm not sitting in Milwaukee. I'm sitting in Monterey, California right now. So obviously, I left Milwaukee. I took a one-way trip, man. uh, Yeah, again, culinary scene in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the late 80s, 1990, 1991, 92. Not too much, not too much to offer other than a couple of good German restaurants.
Right.
Just yeah, maybe like three or four restaurants that after completing the 2-year program at the trade school, obviously scratch your head and go, okay, so what's the next step? So I wound up in this little cafe, and then eventually from the cafe, I went to the Pfister Hotel, which is probably Milwaukee's premier hotel. It's kind of like the old school
Nice.
hotel. That's where the presidents stay when they come into town, and the other bigwigs stay, that's where they stay at the Pfister, right? So there was a dining room in the basement, and they had the old school galley kitchen, and then there was the breakfast, lunch, and dinner outlet on the main floor. And so I wound up from the cafe, going to the hotel and working in a couple of different, the fine dining room, the breakfast, lunch, and dinner place, Sunday brunches, again, flipping omelets in front of people now. Um, but yeah, 1993, January of 1993. So go figure, how many years ago is that?
31,
30,
man.
31,
Oof.
31 years ago, I took a one-way trip from Milwaukee to Los Angeles because there was a friend of the family who told me that if I ever wanted to make the step and come to the West Coast, I had a place to stay with him until I got my feet on the ground.
Nice.
So those the the time was right for me to exit Milwaukee and come out to the West Coast. So then I jumped in at Los Angeles, and it took me a couple weeks, and I grabbed one of those many dining guides and top 25, top 30, and I basically went down the list with whatever resume and whatever information I had, and started looking for a job.
Nice.
And yeah, that's when I at wound up at Pinot Bistro, which was the Patina Group at the time, the Patina Group's second restaurant, and it was in Studio City on Ventura Boulevard. And never forget the day when I'm waiting for my interview, and a not bright blue, but a shiny blue BMW pulls up, and individual gets out, and this individual is wearing Doc Martens and white pants and a white dishwasher shirt with a mohawk and a silver chain with a big old cross. And he introduced himself as the chef. And so that's who my interview was with. And that was the welcome to Los Angeles moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
And
that mohawk.
so anyway, that's so the commitment to moving to Los Angeles, essentially for the culinary experience, obviously was that was the beginning of the end right there. I wasn't about to make that commitment and then go off and do something else. That was never in me to
Right.
do that. So I started out on the grill at Pinot Bistro, making 15 cents more an hour than what I was making in Milwaukee when I left. Do I want to tell you how much that was? Do I want to tell you how much that was in 1993?
It wasn't much, buddy.
565.
Oof.
How times have changed, have they? I went from 550 to 565. There you go.
Yeah, I'm sure things were a whole lot more
Oh yeah.
expensive in LA than Milwaukee.
Yeah. Things were more expensive, but yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to have a place to stay until I got my feet on the ground, and and then eventually I moved into my own little studio, and which was pretty much a rat hole, and then yeah. But anyways, yeah, that was kind of the big dive. That was it. That was the plunge, so to speak.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we all, I think within this industry, we all kind of have a, I don't know, a route that we take or a destination, I think for me, I was heading down a road that was pretty nice restaurants and a little bit more fine dining. And then somebody somewhere along this line said, hey, if you do this, there's more infrastructure and you can take a vacation once in a while. And I was like, well, that sounds ideal. And so I kind of shifted towards bigger restaurants that were a little bit more corporate. Um, what was a corner that you turned and kind of where has that led you?
Hmm. I don't know of how much of a corner I've turned, man. I'm I can be stereotyped as a restaurant guy, a restaurant chef.
Yeah.
I can after my time in this business, 31 years in this business, I can be honest with myself and everybody and say that I never wanted to be some sort of 9 to 5 chef. I never wanted to be a corporate chef. I never wanted to really be a hotel guy, a country club guy, uh, an R&D guy. There are wonderful people in those wonderful fields, but for some reason, restaurants were it for me, man. I was like I said, I was a sucker for a restaurant as a teenager, and it pretty much hasn't changed very much,
It's good.
um, for better or worse, for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's always been challenging but exciting, and it's that junkie thing. I don't know what else to call it. You know, I
That's an
mean,
addiction. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
addiction. Why does an individual, why does an individual want to work in an ER? I mean, that's like that's gnarly, man. to
Yeah.
use a an old term, that's gnarly, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, restaurant can be pretty gnarly sometimes as well. But there's a that dopamine thing. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Absolutely. There's
Yeah.
adrenaline and there's dopamine and there's all sorts of great stuff that just starts pumping through the body. Um,
Yeah. You and I experienced a little bit of that,
yes, we did. Yes, we did. I
for
just remember
better or worse.
I remember the theater rush for The Lion King. You know,
Yeah.
you can just feel you can feel like you can feel the frequency go up as 100 and something people would flow into the restaurant and they wanted to eat right now, man. And you just feel it from the servers, and then that vibe would come back into the kitchen, and the tickets would come in, and we just start running. And I mean, there was a whole lot that was great about that. Um,
Yeah. I heard you mention that on your Instagram post, and it obviously took me back a little bit. And it's fair to say that if I was in control of X, Y, and Z in a restaurant that had a pre-theater rush these days, it's fair to say that think I probably, in this world today, probably sell tickets. That way, exactly what people are like, pre-sell. You know what I mean? Because
yeah,
the whole idea, obviously, of 100+ people walking in a half an hour, 45 minutes, and not knowing what they're going to order, or having a limited menu, but still not knowing exactly what they're going to order, and not sandbagging anything, because that's not the way I don't do that. I don't do it. I didn't do it then, and I
nope.
don't do it now. So somebody can, wave their finger at me and say, well, if you would have sandbagged, you could have gotten the food out faster. But anyways, that's not who I am. That's not my style. So I'll obviously live and die with that with that
And,
attitude. But yeah.
and personally, I can sleep better at night knowing that you haven't changed. That is good to me. That
Yeah.
is a good thing in the world to know that integrity lives on. Quality and character live on. That's amazing to me because I think that a lot of people would sandbag, right? A lot of people would find a different way just to please people. But I think that uh one of the things that's great about being a chef for me was that you have a set of beliefs that you live by, and if you stick to them, boy, you're gonna do okay. I think
Yeah.
almost no matter what, sticking to your guns is definitely a recipe for success.
Yeah, I
I'd
mean,
love,
everybody has to, that's you've mentioned it in your previous podcast. Everybody has to, you know, go through X number of chefs, X number of kitchens to realize who they want to be and who they don't want to be, and
yeah,
what techniques and what systems and what concepts please them, and others are like, no, that's not never. If I have my own place, I'm never going to do it like that. But that's obviously part of the beauty of it. That's supposed to be the beauty of restaurants, and being able to basically sit down and try to get what the chef or what the chef owner is trying to put on the plate, or what kind of music is playing and what the vibe is. And that's part of the at least that's what attracted me when I was a teenager, right?
hell yeah, hell yeah.
you know
I
uh
mean, I remember being at, let's see, I remember going to Mario Batali's restaurant, Babo, way back in like
yeah, you actually
2003.
went.
But I
And
just remember it was like we got a reservation. The only thing we could get was 10:30 on a Sunday night, right? Like, whoo, buddy. And you walk in and it's like dim lighting and it's beautiful, like cream color, everything. And then as you stop and you're at the front desk, you're quiet, like, wait, what is that the Rolling Stones I hear? And it's like the Rolling Stones are on like one, right? Like they're low, and it was, I don't know, it was just something special about getting to listen to like that style of music and this really refined thing. It was just an incredible, it was a vibe, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Um,
Now
uh,
nowadays, yeah,
Man, yeah, that's what you'd say
that's
now, right?
yeah.
Um,
No, it's not ambiance anymore.
no,
It's
it's
vibe.
definitely a vibe for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're gonna like throw ourselves in the time machine and fast forward.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, please do.
please, I mean, tell us where you've gotten to, where you are. I mean, I know that you work at Cantinetta Luca, and I want the world to know about that place because the last time I was there, I was just floored by the food you were doing, which for me is a big thing because you and I worked together for a few years and I knew what you were capable of, but then to see kind of all of the things that you'd been working towards for years come together. So please tell us about
Okay.
Cantinetta Luca.
So I already mentioned that I went from Milwaukee to Los Angeles and spent 13 and a half years in Los Angeles. And then in 2006, I moved to the Monterey area, Central Coast, because there was a restaurant. I'm gonna drop a name here.
That's okay.
I'm gonna drop a couple of names, but I think it's important. Um, so let me go back. Let me regress a little bit. When I was working at Pinot Bistro in 1993 as a line cook on the grill, there was a gentleman who started working the saute station 2 weeks after I had started. 2 weeks after I started, his name is Walter Mansky.
Nice.
So Walter and I were on the same line back in 1993. Walter and I became roommates, got an apartment together in Hollywood, lived together for roughly about a year. Uh, then Walter took off. He went to worked at Il Louis. He worked at Louis Kahns in Monaco. He started he did some traveling. He did some staging overseas. I kept on working in Los Angeles, worked at this huge place called Twin Palms that sat 425 people in Pasadena, in Old Town Pasadena. At the time, it was the hip place because Kevin Costner was one of the owners. Oh, anyways, so 13 and a half years in Los Angeles, Patina Group, five different restaurants in the Patina Group, and then Walter had moved to Carmel to open a restaurant, not open a restaurant himself, but to be the chef of a restaurant in Carmel. And then he and the restaurant owner decided that they were going to open up an Italian spot here in Carmel. So
Yeah.
then Walter and I talked, and he asked me if I wanted to be the chef of the Italian spot here in Carmel. And at the time, a young family. My son was less than 2 years old in Los Angeles already for 13 and a half years. Thought about it for about 30 seconds and then made the move from Los Angeles to Carmel, Monterey area. And the Italian restaurant, as you mentioned, Cantinetta Luca, opened in September of 2006. So I've been here in the more or less in the Carmel, Monterey Bay area since 2006. Over 13 of those years have been at Cantinetta Luca, two different tours now. I was there for the first 11 years as the first 2 years as the executive chef, and then essentially the next 8, 9 years as chef partner, minority partner. I was asked to be a minority partner after 2 years of service,
Nice.
which I thought was cool, but from a tax standpoint and other things, maybe that wasn't the great. This could be another podcast in the future about young chefs making decisions about being partners or owners or members or however you want to call it, whichever title you want to give it. But anyways, we won't get into that now. But yeah, Cantinetta Luca is essentially in my blood. It was my baby, and then it became my 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 family. It became my spouse. It became my children. I don't know. I don't want to bring tears to anybody's eyes, but yeah, I kind of went down that stereotypical restaurant path where basically it consumed almost all of me and pushed other people away, which is obviously unfortunate and looking back at it, but that's life sometimes. So um, as I mentioned, I've been dedicated for a long time, and call it my Midwest roots or what ethics or whatever. If I do something, I do it 110. Otherwise,
Yes.
I don't bother. So sometimes that's not so great for other people close to me, and yeah, that's it's not all roses, but we are who we are, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Sometimes it's difficult to change, especially when these things are ingrained, they're in your blood, so to speak. So but yeah, Cantinetta Luca is just to give you tell you briefly, Cantinetta Luca is an Italian restaurant, authentic Italian restaurant located in Carmel by the sea, which is a gorgeous place on this planet. So I didn't cook Italian. I had a Sicilian grandfather, so I have Sicilian Italian in my blood. Uh, Probably a little bit less than 25%. But I grew up eating Italian food. If it wasn't Italian, it was German, or it was a little bit of Polish, because if anybody knows the town of Milwaukee, very, very, very influenced by different ethnicities. So but yeah, I had never cooked in an Italian restaurant, so that was kind of like a next step for me. It's like, okay, let's see if I could tap into my roots and see if I can do this Italian thing. And and culinary professionals know, uh, you know, Italians have a philosophy about food, and it yeah, it's about the food, it's about the product. It's really not about the manipulation of the product. So that's who I am as an individual. That's who I've learned who I am over the course of time. If somebody dines at Cantinetta Luca, um, let's put it this way: there's no microgreens, there's no micro herbs. I don't use any of that stuff for garnish. That's I save that for other people to use. I keep it pretty straightforward, rustic, Italian. Yes,
Right. And you're making all your
like
pasta nowadays?
mama or nonna. That's the goal. That's the standard. So Cantinetta Luca um, proudly serves as many house-made products as possible, whether it's the Neapolitan pizza program, whether it's the pasta program, whether it's the salumi program, all house-made, not all house-made, but most house-made, because obviously prosciutto San Daniele,
Oh,
you can make I made my own, many of prosciuttos, but consistency and quality, and yeah, so there's certain items that I typically buy, but then yeah, I'm fortunate enough to have a separate room that's located next to the bar in the dining room with a glass window that you can see inside, somewhat of a playroom. Over 17 years now, I've been making house-made salamis and cured meats and be able to hang them for people to see. Obviously, some hang longer than others, but then yeah, but it doesn't end there. I mean, we make all we make all we make all of our own desserts. We make our gelato. We make our sorbet. We make just about as much as we make our own bread. So I don't, that's who I am, and that's what Cantinetta Luca is. So yeah, as I mentioned, I've done 2 tours now. I was there for the first 11 years, and then 2017 I broke off after 11 years to start my own gig with a former sous chef and I. We opened a butcher shop, meat market, deli, nearby town, Seaside, next to Monterey.
Okay.
And we opened that from the ground, like subfloor plumbing, all the way up to everything in the ceiling and everything in between. And that was a learning experience.
Yeah, sounds like it.
It didn't last or at least my part in it didn't last as long as I envisioned. But obviously, as we know, some things just don't work out.
Right.
Some dreams don't come into fruition. So that one didn't come into fruition, and then I found myself involuntarily without a job for the first time in whatever 29 years.
Wow.
Okay, so that was something new. So then I was out on the market looking for the next opportunity, and 2 months, 3 months later, this thing called COVID-19 came around in March of 2020, and obviously the prospects of getting a position at that time was slim to none. That was another learning experience, and then in September of 21, I found myself back at Cantinetta Luca
That's
for
awesome.
for a second tour, because I felt I had changed a little bit and the restaurant had changed a little bit, especially going through COVID. And the owner, he and I, worked out some things and we made a plan for the future. And so, yeah, I went back and jumped right in. And then probably 6, 7 months after I came back, the owner, he and I started talking about maybe if I had any interest in taking over.
Oh well.
And I was, yeah, I have interest. And it took a long time. And then, yeah, May of 2023. Yeah, so 9 months,
Nice.
just about 9 months now. Uh, Aptly titled the chef owner of Cantinetta Luca, and another hat, another hat,
Nice.
right? Because
Nice.
because not only am I the bread baker and the pasta maker and the butcher, but and the salumi maker, but now I'm also the owner too. So yeah, that's okay. It's the key is obviously having support, right? Support
Yeah.
staff.
Yeah. Having those people around you to
Yeah,
help you execute the vision. That's a hell of a journey, man.
yeah,
It's a couple feet away from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and a short order cook. All right, I got one last question.
shoot.
What words of advice would you have for it doesn't necessarily need to be a young cook, but a fresh cook, somebody who's starting at the beginning of their journey, and they say, "Gosh, I want to have my own restaurant." What are your words of wisdom like? And then as we sort of wrap this conversation up,
3 words.
awesome.
Be a sponge. Yeah, no, yes. I mean, I obviously kind of chuckle when I say that, but I do mean it for sure. And I think you understand why. I think that might come out of your mouth, or come out of many of our people who have the tenure, been in the business for 20 plus years. I would just say, try to absorb and be a sponge, and don't overreact. Have patience. Learn with positives and negatives. There's something to learn.
You know,
It's not all roses, and it's not all bad either. So you just need to be able to take it, right? You mentioned about you getting abused and basically being, you called it being a whipping boy. Okay, so not everybody has the stones for being a whipping boy, but is there value in it? I would say yes. Now, obviously, I'm not condoning being somebody's whipping boy for a crazy length of time, because that would be, you might want to define that as being somewhat insane, right? But if if you can gain knowledge and help you, and it helps you grow, then suck it up. Be the sponge.
Be the sponge. How do we find you on social media? Where are we
Okay.
going?
You can find me on my Instagram, aptly named Salumi Man, at Salumi_man. Obviously, CantinettaLuca.com, Carmel by the Sea. Uh, yeah, you can find me there quite often.
That's good.
uh,
Jason, I can't thank you enough for coming to play with us today, and sharing with us what has been your life's journey and your chef's journey.